The engine purred softly as I gripped the steering wheel, the rhythmic hum providing an eerie accompaniment to the darkness outside. The clock on the dashboard read 2:37 a.m. I had been driving for hours on this desolate highway, the only company being the occasional flicker of my headlights on the empty road ahead. My knuckles turned white as I clutched the wheel tighter, trying to shake off the growing unease that had settled in the pit of my stomach. I had chosen this route as a shortcut, a decision I now regretted as I navigated through a thick forest on both sides of the road. The trees seemed to lean in, casting long shadows that danced menacingly in the moonlight. A shiver ran down my spine, and I turned up the heater, hoping the warm air would alleviate my growing anxiety. The radio crackled with static, and I instinctively reached to turn it off. The silence that followed was oppressive, broken only by the sound of my own breathing. My eyes darted to the rearview mirror, half expecting to see something there, but the road behind me was empty, swallowed by the darkness. As I continued driving, the forest seemed to close in around me. The gnarled branches formed sinister silhouettes against the night sky, and every now and then, my headlights would catch a glint of something metallic, as if an unseen presence was lurking just beyond my line of sight. My heart raced, and I wished I had taken the longer, more well-traveled route. I pressed my foot on the gas pedal, urging the car to move faster, to put more distance between me and this ominous stretch of road. The speedometer climbed steadily, and for a moment I felt a fleeting sense of relief. But then, just as quickly, that feeling dissipated when I noticed a figure standing at the edge of the road up ahead. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching in protest as the car skidded to a stop. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the figure. It was a woman, dressed in tattered clothes that hung loosely from her frame. Her hair was wild and matted, and her eyes gleamed with an unnatural intensity in the pale moonlight. My breath caught in my throat as I realized she was facing away from me, looking out into the forest. I hesitated, torn between the impulse to help and the creeping fear that this was no ordinary encounter. My hand hovered over the gear shift, and as if sensing my uncertainty, the woman slowly turned to face me. Her eyes, once vacant, were now fixed on mine. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead as I felt an unspoken communication pass between us. Without warning, she began to move toward the car, her steps slow and deliberate. Panic surged through me, and I finally found my voice, shouting at her to stop. But she paid no heed, her movements unrelenting. With a trembling hand, I fumbled to shift the car into reverse, tires spinning as I backed away from her. As the distance between us grew, I could still feel her eyes on me, a sensation that made my skin crawl. The road stretched on, seemingly endless, and I drove with a fervor I had never known before. My eyes darted between the rearview mirror and the road ahead, half expecting to see her chasing after me, even though I knew it was impossible. Hours passed, or perhaps it was only minutes. Time seemed to have lost all meaning. I could see the first hints of dawn on the horizon, and as the sky lightened, the forest's oppressive grip seemed to loosen. The trees grew farther apart, and the road became wider and more well-maintained. I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding, allowing myself to believe that I had escaped whatever malevolent force had held me in its clutches. Eventually, I spotted the glow of distant streetlights, a sign that civilization was approaching. As I drove into a small town, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The town's inhabitants bustled about, their lives seemingly untouched by the darkness I had just endured. I parked the car and took a moment to compose myself, the events of the night already beginning to feel like a distant nightmare. But as I stepped out of the car, a sudden gust of wind sent a shiver down my spine. I turned to lock the car door, and that's when I saw it. The same woman, standing at the edge of the sidewalk, her eyes fixed on me. My heart raced, and a sinking feeling settled in the pit of my stomach. How had she followed me? I stumbled backward, my mind racing as I searched for an escape route. But the town had transformed. The buildings were crumbling, the streetlights flickering and casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance to a malevolent tune. The woman took a step closer, her gaze unrelenting. My breathing grew ragged as I realized that there was no escape, that this nightmare was far from over. And as the first rays of dawn were swallowed by the encroaching darkness, I knew that I was trapped in a nightmare that had no end, a nightmarish journey on a desolate highway that would haunt me for eternity.